He said, "I'll call you later, Ma." Just like that. No hug. No glance back. Like I wasn't standing there with a pie still warm and hands that raised him from nothing. That was 2 months ago. I waited through Sundays. Through birthdays. Through storms. Then the knock came. A man in a gray suit. With my son's signature. Telling me I had 30 days to vacate the home I built. My mornings were quiet. Tea in the same chipped mug. Radio humming something soft from the 70s. Crossword open, half finished. I never minded leaving some clues blank. There was peace in routine. In the creak of the porch swing. In the way the breeze carried the smell of tomatoes from the garden I tended alone. I didn't have much. But I had a life. And for a long time, I believed I still had my son. His name is Elijah. I named him after the prophet, hoping he'd carry truth wherever he went. He did, for a while. Before the world got louder than his mother's voice. He used to call every Sunday. Just after church, before the football started. We didn't talk long. 15 minutes, maybe 20 if his wife was busy. But those calls? They meant everything. "How's your garden, Ma? You still making those biscuits? You need anything? Just say the word." I never did. Because I gave. That's what mothers do. I gave when I had nothing. Skipped meals so he'd have shoes without holes. Took night shifts at the diner so he wouldn't feel ashamed of his clothes at school. Sold my wedding ring to pay the college deposit. Told him it was in a safe somewhere. He never asked to see it. His graduation day, I stood in the back row. Didn't want to crowd his wife's family. But when he crossed that stage and looked out into the crowd, he found me. And he smiled. That moment lasted me a decade. He called me Ma. Never Mom. Never Mother. Just Ma. Like the Mississippi in his voice hadn't dried up yet. After he got married, the calls changed. Shorter. Quieter. His voice always somewhere else. I told myself he was tired. Or busy. Or distracted by the world that I had worked so hard to give him access to. His wife, Julia, was always polite. But never warm. Like I was a favor to be tolerated. Not a story to be listened to. The first year, they came for Thanksgiving. The second, they sent a card. By the third, nothing. Just a voicemail on a Tuesday saying, "Hope you're well." But I still made stuffing. Set out 2 extra plates. Kept the screen door unlocked just in case. I started keeping a little notebook. Things I wanted to tell him. Not big things. Just little pieces of the day. The rose bush finally bloomed again. Found your old baby sock in the attic. I saw a boy riding a bike with a frog in his pocket, made me laugh. But the notebook stayed full. Never read. Never shared. Still, I wasn't bitter. Not really. Because I remembered his hands when he was 6, always reaching for mine in parking lots. I remembered his face pressed to my chest after nightmares. I remembered the way he whispered, "Ma, I got in," the day the college letter came. He was still in there. Somewhere. That boy who ran barefoot through summer rain. Who brought me a dandelion and said, "You're the prettiest flower, Ma." I believed I hadn't lost him. Not fully. Just, misplaced him. My neighbors stopped asking when he'd visit. My church friends offered careful kindness. She raised him so well, they'd whisper. Life gets busy, they'd excuse. I nodded along. Because I wanted to believe that. I needed to. One Sunday, I made pecan pie from scratch. Left it on his porch while they were out. Wrapped it in a cloth I embroidered the year he was born. With our initials. E+M. No call. No thank you. Just a photo later that week on Julia's social media. Thanking a sweet neighbor for the treat. I didn't comment. I didn't claim it. I just wrote it down in the notebook. I was never truly lonely. Just quietly replaced. The house was getting older. So was I. I'd told him once that I was thinking of adding his name to the deed, just in case. He said that was smart. Said Julia's parents had done the same. He didn't ask twice. Just said, let me know what I need to sign. And that was that. No lawyer. No questions. Just trust. The kind of trust that builds over decades and dies in a second. I sat on that porch swing every evening. Tea on my lap. Notebook beside me. Waiting for the wind to carry his voice home. It never did. But the silence did start to say more than I ever wanted to hear. The last thing I gave him was the original house key. The one with the little brass E on the chain. He smiled. Said, "Don't worry, Ma. I'll always come home." That was the last Sunday he visited. He hugged me with one arm. His other hand holding his phone. He said, "I'll call you later." And walked down the steps without looking back. I watched until he turned the corner. Then I went inside. And reheated the pie he never stayed to eat. It was a Wednesday. Cloudy. Damp. The kind of day where the air feels heavy even before the rain comes. I had just finished folding the towels, still warm from the dryer. The radio was playing something slow, something with strings. I reached for the phone to check the time. That's when I saw it. A missed call. Not from Elijah. From someone named Cray and Linton, attorneys at law. I stared at it for a minute. Didn't recognize the number. Didn't recognize the name. I figured it was a mistake. Maybe a scam. But my stomach had already started to turn. I didn't call back. Instead, I stepped outside. The porch was quiet. But there, tucked neatly under the mat, was a thick white envelope. Legal size. Heavy. My name was typed on the front. No return address. Just a seal in the corner, blue and gold. I brought it inside. Set it on the kitchen table. Stared at it like it might speak first. The kettle whistled, sharp and high. I turned off the burner, let the tea go cold. I opened the envelope. The first page had my name. Then Elijah's. Then words I didn't know how to read. Not at first. Petition to transfer deed of property. Affidavit of diminished capacity. Request for conservatorship. I flipped through them slowly. Like if I turned the pages gently enough, the truth wouldn't hurt as much. There were lines. Boxes checked. Statements that didn't sound like me. Subject is forgetful, unable to manage bills, exhibits signs of confusion. Confusion? I still did my taxes by hand. Still clipped coupons. Still remembered every phone number I'd ever dialed from memory. But there it was. Signed. Filed. Prepared. By my son. Elijah's name. His signature. Typed and printed on the last page. I didn't cry. Not then. I just sat very still. Stared at the tablecloth like I was counting its threads. The room was silent. But everything inside me was screaming. I didn't even notice I was still holding the last page. Until something small fell from it. A post-it note. Yellow. Curled at the corner. My handwriting. Don't forget to call me. Love, Ma. I remembered now. I'd stuck that to a manila folder, years ago, with the original deed inside. Back when I thought he'd need it one day. Back when I thought he was the one I could trust. The folder was gone. But the note remained. A bitter little echo. Of a voice I once believed was being heard. I walked to my filing cabinet. Top drawer. Receipts. Tax papers. Birth certificate. The deed folder wasn't there. Not in the second drawer. Not in the third. I checked the boxes in the hall closet. The old shoebox under the bed. The filing tray in the laundry room. Nothing. I sat on the edge of my bed, still holding that post-it. Still hearing the last words he said. "I'll call you later." I remembered when he first started helping me with paperwork. He'd visit, sit at the kitchen table, ask questions like, "Where do you keep the bills, Ma? Do you have a will? Want me to look over your insurance?" I thought he was being responsible. I thought I was lucky, a son who cared. I never once thought I was handing him the very tools he'd use to erase me. The envelope stayed on the table for 2 days. I didn't move it. Didn't cover it. Didn't throw it away. I wanted it there. Visible. So I could stop pretending. So I could stop waiting. It wasn't confusion they saw in me. It was compliance. Trust mistaken for weakness. I went out to the porch. The garden had started to wilt. Even the tomatoes looked tired. I sat in my swing. Rocked gently. Felt the wind blow just enough to move the chimes. I thought of the first time Elijah said he'd protect me. He was 9. Some boy had teased me at the grocery store, said my hair was messy. Elijah balled up his tiny fists and said, "No one talks about my mama like that." I smiled then. Told him it was sweet. Told him to use words, not fists. I should have listened to my own advice. Because now it was words that cut deepest. Legal ones. Filed ones. Ones that didn't call me Ma. Just, respondent. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing that last voicemail again and again. "Hey, Ma. Can't talk right now. I'll call you later." There was no apology in his voice. No warmth. Just, inconvenience. That call never came. But the lawyer did. And suddenly, all those little moments. The short calls. The unanswered texts. The forgotten holidays. They didn't feel small anymore. They felt like the beginning of a strategy. I opened my notebook. The one I used to write things I wanted to tell him. I didn't write a list this time. Just one line. He didn't forget me. He planned around me. And still part of me waited. Waited for him to knock on the door. To say it was a mistake. To say he didn't know what those papers really meant. But that knock never came either. Just the wind. Just the silence. Just the note, still on the table, still in my handwriting. "Don't forget to call me. Love, Ma." I started seeing it in the details. Not the big things. Those came later. It was in the pauses. The tone. The empty space where care used to live. First time I really noticed, it was my birthday. I'd been up since 6. Baked myself a small lemon cake, his favorite, not mine. I set 2 cups out. Just in case. The phone didn't ring that morning. Or that afternoon. It rang 2 days later. A short call. His voice rushed. Like the wind was behind him, pushing him away from me. "Oh shoot, Ma, happy birthday, yeah? Hope it was good." I said, "It was quiet." He said, "That's nice. Peaceful." Then he hung up to catch another call. That night I wrote in the notebook. Even my birthday's too loud for him now. Another time, I saw a photo online. His wife had posted it. Everyone smiling on a picnic blanket. Julia's parents, her sister, Elijah, even their dog. The caption said, "Family Day, Yellowheart, so grateful for our village." No tag for me. No call that week either. I thought maybe I was busy when he tried. Maybe I missed it. So I checked my voicemail. The last one was from the pharmacy. I tried to remember the last time we'd been in a photo together. Graduation, maybe. 15 years ago. And yet my fridge still held pictures of him. Him in a cap and gown. Him holding his newborn. Him blowing out candles at 8 years old. I kept him visible. He kept me invisible. But still, I excused it. Told myself families drift. Lives get big. I even tried to meet him halfway. I crocheted a baby blanket when I found out about the pregnancy. Soft blue and cream. Tucked in a note. Made with the hands that rocked you to sleep. Hope they keep your baby warm too. No reply. No photo. No thank you. Months later, I visited. He wasn't home. Julia opened the door, didn't ask me in. Behind her, in a pile of toys and wrapping paper, was the blanket. Still folded. Still untouched. I didn't ask about it. I just smiled. And left early. A few weeks later, I brought over a pie. Pecan, again. Left it on the step. The dish came back the next day. Washed. No note. I recognized her handwriting in permanent marker on the bottom. Return to neighbor. Neighbor. I sat down that evening and looked at my hands. These hands that had once been home. Now just an address. It was like walking through my memories and watching someone quietly turn off the lights, one by one. And still I tried. I left voicemails. Short ones. Soft ones. Just thinking of you. Gardens blooming again. Made your favorite, come by if you want. Nothing. Not even a text. Once, I brought up the silence. Said, I miss how we used to talk. He laughed, too lightly. Said, you worry too much, Ma. Then changed the subject. Like my loneliness was inconvenient. Like affection was something to be scheduled between meetings. He started calling me Mom. Not Ma. Mom sounded like a formality. Like a line item on a to-do list. I tried to brush it off. Tried to tell myself I was imagining the chill in his voice. But when he forgot the anniversary of his father's passing. When he didn't show up to place flowers with me that year. I knew. That wasn't forgetfulness. That was distance. Intentional. Gradual. Like waves slowly taking back the shore. And the worst part? He didn't even know he was doing it. Or maybe he did. Maybe he counted on me not noticing. Not complaining. Not pushing back. Because I never had. I never asked for more than he offered. Never demanded what I deserved. I gave freely. Loved without invoice. Hoped without proof. Even as the phone grew quieter. Even as the mailbox filled with silence. I told myself it was just life. Work. Marriage. Stress. Little hurts. Easy to excuse. Until they weren't. I didn't break all at once. No one ever does. It was slow. Like a roof starting to leak, one drop at a time. You don't notice until the ceiling caves in. It was early spring. The daffodils had started blooming, stubborn, bright little things. I stood at the sink, rinsing a chipped teacup, when I glanced at the newspaper. Folded on the counter. Left by the mail slot. The headline didn't catch me. It was a small notice. Near the classifieds. Real estate transfer. My address. New owner, Elijah Thomas Monroe. I didn't move at first. Just blinked. Read it again. Then again. The letters didn't change. The name didn't disappear. I ran my finger across the ink. Felt the truth rising like bile. I opened the drawer where I used to keep my emergency cash. It was still there. A thick rubber-banded stack, untouched. I reached for the old manila folder I'd hidden behind the recipe books. Gone. The deed. The will. The medical forms I had never signed. Gone. I checked the back of the drawer. Checked the bookshelf. Checked my late husband's old tool cabinet in the shed. Nothing. Just dust. And absence. I walked outside. The air was still. Too still. My garden, which I'd neglected for weeks now, had started to wilt. Like it knew. I pulled my sweater tight around me and made my way to Elijah's house. I still called it that. Even though it didn't feel like his anymore. His car was there. Julia's too. I knocked. Waited. Nothing. I knocked again, softer this time. I could hear movement inside. A baby crying. A laugh. The television. But no answer. I sat on the porch steps. Hands folded. I waited an hour. Then 2. No one opened the door. The light stayed on, though. The curtains shifted once. Someone looked out, then looked away. I left a note on the door. I'm still your mother. That hasn't changed. No reply. No call. 3 days later, I drove by again. My note was gone. A new keypad lock on the door. No keyhole. I stared at it through the windshield. He had changed the lock. The key I gave him, the one with the brass E, was no longer enough to open his door. Or mine. I drove home. Didn't turn on the lights. Didn't take off my coat. I sat in my late husband's chair. The one Elijah used to curl up in while watching cartoons. The one that always smelled like pipe tobacco and lemon oil. I looked around the room. Every shelf held a piece of him. His drawings. His trophies. The blanket I used to wrap him in when he was sick. I remembered that winter when he was 4. He had a fever, shaking so bad I held him all night. Didn't sleep a minute. Just hummed to him, quietly. Over and over, "You're safe. You're safe. You're safe." He doesn't remember that. But I do. I remember it every time I try to understand how he got here. The next morning, I boxed up the photo frames. One by one. The birthdays. The school dances. His wedding. Every memory that now felt like fiction. I didn't cry. I just kept placing things into cardboard. Taping them shut. Stacking them neatly in the attic. Then I stood in the hallway. And I saw it. The graduation photo. Framed in silver. Elijah in his cap, me beside him. He looked proud. I looked tired. But happy. I took it down. Held it in both hands. Then I turned it over. There, on the back, in his handwriting. For Ma, we made it. I love you. That's what shattered me. Not the lies. Not the silence. Not even the lock. That message. Because it wasn't just love he'd forgotten. It was history. He wasn't just moving forward. He was rewriting the past. I sat on the floor with the photo in my lap. Felt the sharp edge of the broken frame press into my palm. I didn't scream. Didn't curse. Just whispered. Empty. Forgotten. Perfect. Like maybe if I said it softly enough, it wouldn't echo. I placed the photo in a drawer. Face down. Didn't bother fixing the glass. Let it stay cracked. Just like the memory. Have you ever remembered something small, just when everything felt like it was falling apart? I didn't scream. Didn't throw things. Didn't drive to his house and demand answers. I'd done enough yelling in my head. I was tired of echoes. So I got quiet. Not weak, quiet. There's a difference. On Monday morning, I put on my best coat. Pressed slacks. Buttoned blouse with the tiny pearl at the neck. I hadn't worn it since church reopened after the pandemic. I left early. Walked to town. Didn't tell anyone where I was going. Didn't need to. The lawyer's office was 3 blocks down from the bakery where Elijah used to beg for honey buns. I stepped inside. The woman behind the desk smiled like this was a routine visit. "Do you have an appointment?" "No," I said. "But I have all the papers you'll need." Her smile faded a little. She glanced at the man in the corner office. 10 minutes later, I was seated across from a man younger than Elijah. He looked surprised when I laid out my folder. "Ma'am, these are very thorough." "I kept everything," I said. He nodded. Cleared his throat. "We can revoke the deed transfer. Based on this evidence, the original transfer appears deceptive," I finished for him. He looked at me, like I wasn't the kind of woman who said that word. But I was now. "We filed everything. Deed reversal. Conservatorship contest. Power of attorney, cancelled. I'd signed them in trust. Now I signed them in awareness. It took 1 hour to undo what love had blinded me to for a decade. Before I left, I handed the lawyer a sealed envelope. "My new will," I said. "Effective immediately." He opened it, scanned the first page, then raised his eyes. "You're sure about this?" I nodded. "I'm more sure than I've ever been." Outside, the wind picked up. Blew the dust off the sidewalk. I walked back with my spine straight and shoulders square. At home, I brewed a fresh pot of tea. Didn't use my chipped mug. Used the one with the gold rim, the one I'd been saving for a special occasion. This counted. Then I went to the mailbox. Stood there a while. 2 names were printed on the label. E. Monroe and M. Monroe. I peeled it off slowly. Letter by letter. Left only one name behind. Just mine. I walked back inside. Found his childhood drawings in the drawer. Folded them. Tied them with twine. Placed them gently in a box and marked it. Returned to sender. Then I opened the junk drawer in the kitchen. Pulled out the answering machine I hadn't used in years. Plugged it in. One message blinked. I pressed play. "Hey Ma. Just checking in. I know we've been busy, anyway, call me when you can." His voice was warm. Too warm. It wasn't recent. It was from 3 years ago. I must have saved it by accident. I deleted it. No hesitation. The machine beeped. Then silence. It felt like fresh air. Silent scene rule. I opened the drawer by the front door. Took out the spare key, the original brass one with the E charm. Held it in my palm. I didn't cry. Just breathed. Then I walked out back. Stood at the edge of the creek. The same creek Elijah used to splash in as a boy. Where he found tadpoles in jars and believed everything could be mended with time and sunshine. I tossed the key in. Watched it sink. No speech. No ritual. No anger. Just release. I didn't slam the door. I just closed it, finally. Have you ever stayed quiet just to keep the peace? That night, I didn't wait by the phone. Didn't check his page. Didn't sit with the notebook in my lap. I poured myself a glass of wine. Opened the window. Let the cold air in. I was alone. But for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel erased. I felt cleared. Like someone had finally swept the broken pieces off the floor. And left room for something else. I thought the worst was over. Thought reclaiming the deed, cutting his name off the mailbox, and tossing that key into the creek was the end of it. It wasn't. The deeper betrayal was still buried. Waiting, like rot beneath good wood. I just hadn't stepped on the soft spot yet. It came the way most truth does, by accident. I was organizing the back closet. A box had caved in from the bottom, papers spilled everywhere. Tax returns, recipes, Elijah's report cards. And a red folder. Unlabeled. Unfamiliar. Inside, a printout. Emails. Dozens of them. Not to me. About me. Subject lines like: regarding Marion's cognitive decline. Power of attorney justification. Revised declaration for care facility admission. The senders were cold. Law firm names. Case managers. Julia's name, again and again. Her words. She's sweet, but slipping fast. We're just trying to do what's best before she forgets where the stove is. Then this. Elijah will keep her calm while we file. She trusts him. I sat down. Couldn't breathe. She called me sweet. Like I was a pet. Like I was fragile and fading. But worse. My son agreed. I found his reply in one thread, short and clinical. She still drives, but repeats herself. I'll collect the deed and prep signatures. Repeats herself. I'd said the same thing twice once during a call, months ago. I remember it. I was nervous. He'd been distant. I asked if he got the pie, then asked again. That was all it took. A boy I raised with stories and songs, now reducing me to a bullet point. I reached for the envelope he'd mailed weeks earlier, the legal one with the false statements and stamped authority. Held it side by side with this printout. They matched. Same date. Same lies. But here, in the email, I saw the full thread. The origin. Julia started it. But Elijah followed. Carried it. With his silence. With his agreement. With his willingness to forget who I'd been. I looked over to the drawer, the one that used to hold birthday cards, scribbled in his childhood handwriting. I opened it. Empty now. I had cleared it out during the shift of power. Didn't know then what else I was erasing. But now I did. They hadn't just tried to take my house. They'd written me off. Preemptively mourned me while I was still making tea and sweeping my porch and remembering everything. They wanted control. Money. Maybe even pity from others. Look what we're dealing with, poor old Marion. But it wasn't just property. It was dignity. I sat back in my chair. Felt the weight of every sacrifice I'd made over decades pressed down like rain on a tin roof. The long nights at the diner. The used coats I wore so he could have new ones. The meals I skipped so he wouldn't feel poor at school. I remembered walking him to school one cold morning, wrapped in my scarf. He'd turned back to wave. I had waved until he disappeared behind the gate. I'd do it all again. But now I knew. He wouldn't. I stood up. Pulled open the back of my closet where I kept things no one else touched. My husband's safe. I still had the key. One of the few that hadn't changed. Inside were two things. My wedding ring. A letter. Not from my husband. From Elijah. College days. Ma, I owe you everything. I'll make you proud. Someday I'll pay you back. Love you forever. I hadn't read it in years. But I never threw it out. I ran my fingers over the words. They were ink, not typed. Real. Honest. Before ambition got louder than memory. Before Julia's voice replaced mine in his heart. I held the letter beside the email. One promised love. The other signed me away. They didn't just forget me. They erased me. And somehow, that hurt worse than being taken. Worse than the silence. Worse than the lock. They made a version of me that didn't exist. And handed that to the court. An old woman. Forgetful. Incompetent. So they could be heroes. So they could be owners. But I still remembered. Still remembered the recipe for his favorite chicken stew. Still remembered the night I sat by his bed with pneumonia. Still remembered the sound of his first cry in the hospital, how I swore I'd protect that voice forever. And now? Now he used his voice to silence mine. But not anymore. I didn't want revenge. I wanted peace. But I wanted it on my terms, not borrowed, not begged for. So I made a choice. Not out of spite. Out of clarity. The kind that comes when you've been emptied. And find you're still standing. First thing I did was call the lawyer again. Told him I needed to update my will. He sounded cautious. Same beneficiary? No, I said. This time, I'm choosing someone who knows what it means to give without taking. He came to the house with a fresh folder. Sat at my kitchen table. Listened while I spoke slowly and clearly. I left the house, every brick and beam of it. To a women's shelter outside of town. One that helped older women get back on their feet. I'd volunteered there once, years ago, helping someone write a resume. She hugged me on the way out and said, "You've got the kind of calm people borrow hope from." I'd forgotten about that moment. But now, it felt like it was waiting to be remembered. I didn't tell Elijah. Didn't need to. Let the silence do the talking. Next, I dug through the garden shed. Found the trowel, the shears, the old seed packets I kept from better years. I cleared out the rose bushes. They were too proud. Too sharp. I planted wildflowers. Messy, bright, soft-edged. I planted them in the pattern of a question mark. Curving from the porch to the gate. Because that's what I had been. A question no one wanted to answer. A presence that made people uncomfortable. Not anymore. Now I bloomed where I wanted. I started going by my middle name again, Ruth. The name my grandmother whispered as a blessing. The name that came before motherhood. Before I was someone's wife. Before I was Ma. I filed the change at the courthouse. Signed the papers with a steady hand. The clerk looked at me and smiled. "Fresh start?" she asked. "No," I said. "Just coming back to myself." That night, I went through the last of the storage boxes. Old birthday cards, hospital bracelets, and the baby sock I kept from Elijah's first days. I didn't throw it out. But I didn't keep it out either. I placed it gently inside a wooden box. Locked it. Labeled it, then. Some memories need shelves. Not altars. I found the cracked graduation photo, the one from section 5. I'd left it face down for weeks. This time, I picked it up. Took out the photo. Pressed a dried wildflower behind the glass instead. One from my new garden. The bright purple one with frayed petals and stubborn roots. I reframed it. Put it back on the shelf. Not as a memory. As a decision. I cleared space in the living room. Donated the furniture Elijah once picked out. Too stiff, too polished. It never felt like home anyway. I replaced it with a second-hand armchair, soft and faded. One I chose for myself. I sat in it that evening. Curled my legs up. Lit a candle. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was waiting. Didn't feel like I was taking up borrowed space. I felt rooted. Steady. That night, I dreamt of my younger self. Not the mother version. The girl who once wanted to be a poet. Who loved the sound of rain on tin and whispered promises into the night air. She looked at me. Smiled. And said, "Took you long enough." I woke up laughing. Soft. But whole. I made a pot of soup that morning. Not Elijah's favorite. Mine. Turned on the old radio. Let it play what it wanted. Then I opened the back door. Watched the wind dance through the wildflowers. They bent but never broke. They didn't ask for permission to grow. They just did. Viewer prompt. Would you have walked away, or taken everything back? My answer was simple. I didn't take back what was stolen. I took back what was mine. My name. My home. My peace. That was the choice. Not loud. Not vengeful. But mine. Them, I whispered. Then I remembered who I was. I pulled out my phone. A new voicemail sat in the inbox. From Elijah. I stared at it. Didn't listen. Just pressed delete. Do you believe quiet dignity is stronger than revenge? The mornings feel different now. Not brighter, just honest. There's no pretending anymore. No waiting on a phone that doesn't ring. No checking the mailbox like hope lives inside it. It doesn't. And that's all right. I still drink my tea on the porch. Same chipped mug, I kept that part. But the chair beside me stays empty. Not in mourning. In peace. The wildflowers have taken over the front walk. Pinks and yellows climbing over each other like children. Messy. Beautiful. Unapologetic. I don't trim them. I let them sprawl. Because growth doesn't need permission. I was sitting there yesterday when the mail came. An envelope from the shelter. The one I left the house to. Inside, a letter. Handwritten, trembling, but strong. Thank you, Miss Ruth. We walk past the kitchen and feel the kind of love that must have lived there. It's not just a house. It's a place that remembers what it's like to be held without cost. I read it twice. Then again. Folded it neatly. Tucked it inside my notebook. Not the old one. Not the one filled with silence. A new one. This one with blank pages. Still open. Still ready. I don't write about Elijah anymore. Not out of anger. Just release. He exists somewhere in the past now. A version of him I once loved without limit. And a version of me that loved without boundaries. Both of us changed. Only one of us survived it with softness intact. I went to the creek again this morning. The same place I threw the brass key. The water's lower now. Summer heat does that. But the key is still there. Somewhere under the surface. I don't want it back. Let it rust. Let it sink into the silt like so many words unsaid. On the way back, I stopped by the mailbox. It had one piece of mail, a local newsletter. Inside was a photo of the shelter. My house, now painted soft green. Children's shoes on the front step. Laughter hanging in the doorway like a wind chime. They didn't just move in. They filled it. With new stories. With women who know what it means to be replaced, and still rise. I smiled. It wasn't a loss. It was a gift. The final gift I gave without apology. I walked around the back of the house. The side Elijah never saw. Where the lilacs grow wild and the soil is soft from years of rain. I dug a small hole. Not deep. Just enough. Dropped something inside. The broken frame. The glass I never fixed. The letter Elijah wrote in college. Not out of spite. Out of release. I covered it with soil. Planted a wildflower above it. No headstone. No ceremony. Just a burial of what almost broke me. And then. I did the one thing I'd put off for months. I walked back into the house. To the far room. The one I hadn't entered since last fall. My husband's study. It still smelled like lemon oil and dust. I opened the window. Let in the air. Sat in his old chair. Ran my fingers over the desk. Then I opened the drawer. Took out the spare key. Not to the house. To the safe. I opened it. Only one thing inside. A chair. Tiny. Wooden. A dollhouse piece I'd found when Elijah was little. He used to call it his thinking chair. I sit in it when I want to fix something in my head, he'd say. I stared at it. Placed it on the windowsill. A symbol now. Of everything I couldn't fix. And everything I survived anyway. Because this was my house. My story. My voice. And finally. I wasn't whispering anymore. I walked back to the porch. Sat down slowly. Watched the sun make long shadows across the yard. I didn't feel proud. Didn't feel triumphant. Just still. Just right. I was never the echo. I was the voice they tried to silence. The key I never gave became the one that freed me.